Hello and welcome. Today we've got a fantastic guest with us, someone who's working with Mahi at the moment, a registered nutritionist, Gopi, who has over 23 years in the nutrition field, experience working in hospitals, working in community, and now in the private sector, including working for the World Cancer Research Fund and with Mahi Health. Hello, Gopi. Great to see you here today.
Kiran, thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
One of the things about the work that you do that I've noticed is around the cooking. And there's a lot to be said around the joy of cooking and what people can get from cooking. So I'd just love to explore that a little bit with you. And I want to think more about what you've been doing this week with your clients and with your work.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when I do my sessions and my talks, it's all about making that client feel comfortable. And if I can put a smile on a client's face and allow them to take away one thing from the session, for me, I know I've done my job well. And then, getting them involved in cooking, teaching them the basics and focusing on that, stemming away from that complexity of nutrition and going back to basics, especially around cooking. Like I work with a lot of breast cancer patients and I'm doing these talks and they're going through a treatment. Their mood is quite low and they just want help and they just want some support around how to cook nutritious food in a simple way. And for me, if I can do that, then that brings me a lot of joy.
So you're working with these clients or patients, and where are you meeting them? Is it online? Are you meeting them in their kitchens online? How does it work?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate for Future Dreams, which is the breast cancer charity that I work for. They have a beautiful kitchen space where I do the cook-alongs. I do them monthly and I do talks on different nutrition topics. So a group of patients come and they'll actually get involved in the cooking. So I will think of a series of recipes and I'll get them to make it. So it's kind of a community feel, getting them involved. And as you know, my recipes are very simple, colourful and nutritious and very easy for people to follow.
So that's in real life, is it, that you do that? And where is that? Is that in London?
That's in King's Cross in London, yeah.
It's in King's Cross. And Future Dreams is not an organisation that I know very much about. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about Future Dreams, and perhaps even there might be some people listening who might be wondering how they can get involved in Future Dreams, either as a client or as a volunteer.
Absolutely. It's a specific charity for only breast cancer patients. And it's a space that patients can just come in and use that space. And they offer a lot of complementary therapies, talks, cooking sessions. People can just come there and meet other people going through breast cancer journey as well. And they do a lot of events, fundraising events. There's been a lot of kind of famous people come in. We've had chefs like Melissa Hemsley doing talks and cook-alongs. So it's fantastic. And for me, it's just so rewarding when I go and do those talks and cooking sessions.
And how many people do you have in the session?
Yeah, it varies. Usually there's about 15 for the cooking session. For talks, it can be about 25. I do it online and face-to-face. And they're also linked.
The sessions are quite interactive, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What were you going to say? They're linked with?
They're also linked with World Cancer Research Fund. So I do the Cook Through Cancer. So I do those online sessions. So I've created a series of about 12 recipes, and each month we'll have a specialist dietitian and myself doing the online session. So I'll be doing the cooking live whilst I'll ask questions, and the dietitian will be able to answer a lot of their cancer common questions. So it is kind of very evidence-based and backed up by.
Yeah, that's really good. And so if patients are getting treatment for breast cancer, would they normally find out about this from their hospitals, their appointments? Is that how they find out about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Word of mouth, through the internet, fundraising. I mean, they do get a lot of support, and obviously through like World Cancer Research Fund. So it's a lot through, I guess, predominantly word of mouth.
And I think there's emerging knowledge. I think that a lot of the knowledge is already there, but I think there's emerging knowledge and widening understanding that nutrition can have impacts with breast cancer. So I don't know if you're able to tell us a little bit more about that, or if you know about sort of the connection between breast cancer and nutrition.
Yeah, a lot of the guidelines are about, especially when it comes to the World Cancer Research Fund, it is about there's no miracle foods. We know there's no superfoods. There's no specific diet for the cure of cancer, but there are principles that can help, especially combating, kind of helping with symptoms and general overall health. So we're talking about having a healthy, balanced diet, increasing the fiber, limiting the alcohol, doing the exercise. Those are some of the common ones. So it is more looking at, I guess, a holistic approach of nutrition, not just nutrition itself, but we're talking about stress, sleep, hydration, mood. But obviously with the breast cancer patients, there's a lot of the symptoms they go through, the treatments that they go through, it leaves them completely fatigued. So it's how do they cope with things like taste changes?
And how do they cope with things like taste changes? How do you support them, like with the cooking side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So focusing on using a lot of variety of ingredients. So things like more spices, using like more citrus fruits like lemon, ginger, lime, and how can they make their cooking taste good? How can it be more enticing? By adding more ingredients, fresh herbs and spices, and that also counts towards your kind of plant-based points as well.
So I'm wondering, and other people might be wondering, what did you cook this week with your groups?
Yeah, because it's kind of the festive season, we did a combination of kind of these Buddha bowls, I call it. So we made a combination of large salad bowls, but incorporating different grains, different vegetables, different plant-based sources of protein. But we also made some kind of pastry-based tarts. And the whole concept behind this is easy, simple cooking, and not everything has to be completely fresh. Like we had pastry that was ready-made. You get the just roll pastry. But then the toppings we put on it were things like vegetables, onions, tomatoes, a bit of cheese. So for someone who is going through treatment for cancer and they don't feel like cooking, these kind of things are like simple, like putting a salad together or using up leftovers and really getting them to understand, what types of vegetables they can use and getting them to just think outside the box.
I think that's really good. You're widening variety, widening scope. And I think one of the big words you said there that I always pick up on is easy. We're always talking about within Mahi as well, trying to make things easy. So what are the things that actually make it easy, do you think, in terms of cooking that people can take away?
Yeah, I definitely think planning ahead, using up leftovers, using basic cooking equipment. Like if you've got an air fryer, that's great. But if you don't, use your oven. Even use things like your microwave, stock up on your freezer, your fridge. Like even I always recommend frozen fruit and vegetables. They still retain the nutrients. They're just as good. If you make a meal, batch cook it so you can put them into, a container and put it in the fridge. And then when you don't feel like cooking, you can just take it out and have it the next day. Canned products, canned pulses. Pulses are, such a great source of fiber, iron, they're rich in nutrients, they're cheap,
Yeah.
You're talking about your food staples like rice, pasta. They're all nutritious. And some people, they stem away from it. They fear the carbs, but it's how can you use different ingredients to make it nutritionally balanced? We're not talking about just...
Well, I think you've sort of given us so many foods just there in one sentence, and just the variety of the color, textures, the different types of foods, the different amounts of protein and fiber and carbs in there. It just shows that you can have lots and lots of variety. I often think that people don't have the knowledge, but once they have the knowledge, they can then start to apply it in more ways. And there's this thing around planning versus being a bit spontaneous, and the thing around having leftovers, for me, doesn't seem like... Some people might plan it. Sometimes that's the spontaneous thing. It's like, actually, I'll have that tomorrow for lunch, even though it's not technically what I normally have for lunch. It's an opportunity to have it. And often I find that food tastes really good the next day, especially when the sauces start to seep in. As well, it has a different texture to it sometimes.
Absolutely.
And I think also this spontaneity around grabbing whatever's left in the fridge. So not even just the leftovers that you've cooked, but the leftovers of the food as well, and what they can do with that. And sometimes you don't even know what you're going to cook with it. You just kind of like put it all in a pan and you have a bit of a play with it in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying to someone, I was doing a talk yesterday at Future Dreams, and we were talking about, kind of batch cooking and how to meal plan and what kind of meals, because I think people struggle with what meals they can have like day to day. And I was saying, like, even if you had a long day, a long busy day, even something like eggs on toast, is a meal in itself, and then just have some tomatoes on the side. It's basic, but you're getting some nutrition,
Even you're increasing the variety straight away with that. And you're even getting a lot of different types of macronutrients by doing that as well. So I think that's a really key thing there. Even the simple thing like egg, toast and tomatoes can be nutritious.
Yeah. And things like, how can you, I guess, enhance more of your nutrition, like drizzle a bit of olive oil so you get it some good fats, using nuts and seeds as a garnishing,
Yeah.
they're all
Yeah.
small ways, but they have a big impact on your health in a positive way.
And I really don't like the term balanced meals. I just find it very abstract. However, this is, in essence, what you're describing is the balanced meal, isn't it? Because you're adding in all the goodness and all the different things, but you're still feeling full, and you're still feeling like you've had something that you've really enjoyed as well.
Absolutely. And it doesn't need to be perfect, gourmet. It just needs to be simple, something that's going to satisfy you, keep you full. And I always say to clients, focus on what you can add in rather than take away.
So what is it about pastry? Because I've noticed in your cooking that you love pastry. Is it because it's really easy to use? And why is pastry such a big part of some of your cooking?
I think with pastry, it's like I guess it's an alternative, but it is very tasty, but you could do so much with it. And there's different types of pastry, like phyllo pastry, you've got puff pastry, you've got short crust pastry. But even the just roll ones, you could do so much out of it. And in this cooking session that I did, someone did like a calzone type. So they folded the pastry and they cut it into slices. And then we did like an open style pastry. And then even with the Buddha bowls, some people mix the Buddha bowl completely, and then other people just left particular vegetables in a bowl, and then they had their grains on the side, then their protein. So it's just different variations. And again, like I said, it's quite, it doesn't involve, with the Buddha bowls, you don't really need to cook anything. We even have ready to cook grains, like the ones in the pouches, for convenience.
Yeah, I think that's it. People often worry about things coming in pouches now. There's a lot of talk around ultra processed foods and people worry about that. So can you help to demystify some of that? These things that are coming in pouches, what are the things that you would say that you can absolutely have more of, the things that are in pouches in supermarkets? And can you perhaps talk about some specific brands or specific products that people can grab from the supermarket?
Definitely, like rice and grains. If you don't have the time to cook it from fresh and boil it, the grains are absolutely fine. It's always worth just looking at the ingredients to see what they've got in it, but most of it will just be like a bit of whole grain rice or whatever type of rice or grains you choose with a bit of oil, and then you can simply just microwave it or just have it cold as it is. Yes, it is processed, as a lot of foods are processed, but to save time, convenience, and it can be cheap. You can even take it with you if you're going to work, take it with you with your lunch and just have it. So you've got some grains there, you've got some good quality grains there to use. I mean, I use them all the time when I can't be bothered, to cook. So
I think that there's confusion a lot around ultra processed food, and it can be really hard for people to start to navigate that. But I've found that the kind of ready-made lentils and pulses and rice, multigrain rice, has been a little bit of a little thing that I would grab. I mean, for me, I'd probably avoid the rice. It's just a thing that I'm not a big fan of. But the lentils, when you can grab them in the pouches, they weren't there 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
They are here now. And the ingredients list is, I find, another way that people can try and get a better understanding of what kind of processing is going on here. Of course, it doesn't give you the cooking processing, but it can give you a little bit more understanding, because if there's a long list of ingredients, especially words that you've never seen before, that can give you a flag that this is pretty ultra processed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, like a shop bought cake you get from one of the supermarkets, let's just say a red velvet cake. You take it, you look at the ingredients, there's like over 20 ingredients, emulsifiers, additives, preservatives, colorings. But when you actually make a cake at home, you've got what? Eggs, sugar, butter, flour, baking powder.
Yeah. I have to say, I've never looked at the ingredients at the cake at supermarkets, so I'll just grab it and eat it. But that's a really good point. There's a lot more ingredients there.
The same with like things like ready meals and a lot of, the processed foods. It's just worth just looking at the ingredients, seeing what's in it, what extras are going in. Yes, we need to preserve the product, but if you did make something like, your shepherd's pie at home, you don't need a lot of ingredients. Again, potatoes, mince, bit of tomato, sauce, and seasoning.
Just a few things.
Yeah.
Well, I'm starting to get hungry now. I've only eaten one orange for breakfast, and we're just talking about food the whole time. I'm going to go and go straight into the kitchen. You must be hungry all the time if you're talking about food all the time.
It brings me a lot of joy. I remember once my PT was talking about something about food, and he said, wow, your face just lights up. But for me, I think it's much more than just calories in, going calories out. It's culture. It brings people together. We're constantly surrounded by it. There's so much more to it. And I think a lot of the time it gets taken out of context and the meaning behind it.
That's really true. And that's a fitting segue into something that I wanted to talk about with you, which is around the festive season. And you mentioned that you're doing some festive meal planning. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. What is the best way that we can have a good Christmas, a healthy Christmas, especially when thinking around diabetes? And we'll start with broadly, and then we'll go into some of the details.
I think you don't really need to completely restrict yourself and change anything. Continue your usual routine. I think when it comes to Christmas, people feel like they can go all in, and then suddenly it comes to January and you've got all the diets and people giving everything up. But just be mindful and enjoy the festive period. And the good thing about Christmas meal is actually it's got a lot of the food groups. We're talking about the roast vegetables, the potatoes, the protein, which is the meats or the plant-based versions that people are having. So actually it's a really nutritious meal, and it's just being mindful and I guess embracing that, those festivities. And it's okay to say no as well.
Do you have Christmas dinner?
Yes.
What's going to be in yours?
Well, this time I think my brother's cooking, so I know there'll be a lot of delicious food, but it'll be a wide variety. And I think that's the good thing about Christmas, because people make so many dishes. You don't feel like you have to have everything on the plate. You can say no to certain things. If you don't want it, that's also fine. But it's also about taking your time with eating around Christmas, which, they say our eyes are bigger than our stomach,
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot to look at with food over Christmas, isn't there?
Yeah. And people might, people tend to skip meals because they know they're going to have a massive meal. So they might skip breakfast and then they'll wait till like 3-4 o'clock and then they'll be really, really hungry. But actually, if you just maybe have a breakfast and then have your lunch and, it can actually help with your...
Well, I was doing some research recently around fasting, and when people skip the breakfast meal, actually their glucose spikes and their insulin response is going to be less effective, even on the same day. So you're going to get higher glucose responses if you don't have a breakfast, which is really kind of counterintuitive, and it's still something that I'm trying to get my head around. And there's still some gray areas in this research as to whether, if you're having more calories, does that make it better or worse to miss the morning meal? It's very difficult for me to know based on the research that I was doing this week. But let's look at the detail of this Christmas dinner then, because I think there's lots of good nutritious stuff in it. So let's talk about some of the specific things that you would say these are really nutritious for a Christmas dinner.
Okay, let's look at the vegetables. So you've got things like carrots, Brussels sprouts. I'm trying to think what other vegetables they have. I mean, some people do like spinach.
It's like roasties, potato roasties. Exactly. And so I'm not averse to people having roasties. I do see it with the clients with their glucose monitors, how high blood glucose goes if they have a big jacket potato. But that's very different to having a few potatoes on your Christmas dinner plate.
And potatoes with the skin on.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if they cook it with maybe olive oil, you're getting some good fats in there. Think of how you can cook those potatoes. You're roasting it or you boil it. There's so many ways to maybe slightly saute it. You don't have to do the traditional roast potatoes. You can, add to it or make it your own, add more onions and garlic or even things like pesto or more spices, sprinkle fresh herbs on it, rosemary, doesn't need to be the classic kind of roast potatoes. And then got your mains, which is the proteins. And again, that's roasted as well. So like roast chicken or roast turkey, or there's plant-based options that people go for as well for those who are vegetarian.
Do you have a preference from a health perspective, probably less so for diabetes, but generally between turkey and chicken? Is there an actual preference around this?
Well, I'm not sure about that one. I think it's what people enjoy ultimately with things like poultry, like white meat, chicken, turkey is actually quite good, or you can get for lean mince as well. It's probably better, but then some people like to go for the red meat options as well.
Okay. And what about the plant-based options? I find this is a dangerous area. In our family, Christmas dinner is a bit dangerous because over Christmas, my mum will normally do a lot of bulk cooking for the wider family. And if we have Indian, it always comes out perfect. If we come out Christmas dinner, it's always a bit like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Because we're having the nut roast or something similar. And it's like, we've got this big thing that kind of comes through that's called the nut roast, and none of us really have any idea what's in it, and we just put it in the oven, and then it tastes weird a lot of the time. So I guess, what is the best options for vegetarians, and what is this nut roast, and are there any other options available instead of that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I know with the vegetarian vegan recipes, the nut roasts are like, even if you Google it, it will be like nut roast or mushroom Wellington, or those are the common things. But actually, you can do lots of different types. Nowadays, we've got so many different types of plant-based proteins. So you could do like, I think last time I did like a vegetable wreath, but I made sure for the protein, because a lot of it tends to be a lot of vegetables as well. So there's no protein in there. So I added a bit of soy mince and chestnuts and leeks.
Yeah.
So you could do that, or you could just even do things like with tofu, like even just bake tofu and have it on the side. It doesn't need to be like a big grand dish, but
I'm totally feeling a tofu Christmas. There's something about that. I reckon the tofu Christmas
tofu
would be really
roast,
good.
or even do something with
Tofu
pulses.
roast. I mean, would someone get a massive block of tofu and just roast it? I mean, would anyone do that? I mean, surely the inside probably wouldn't be very
The other
good.
thing you could do is slice the tofu, marinate it, and coat it with breadcrumbs. So it
Yeah,
could
that
even be
sounds
like,
good.
and then you can add all your spices. So it's almost like tofu nuggets, but you could have that.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like one big block, but you can just slice it up, marinate
I
it.
sort of feel there's something about presenting one big thing in the middle. And I can just imagine like 10 pieces of tofu all put together in a big plate and like sort of roasted with your breadcrumbs as well, and like presenting this beautiful thing that no one's ever seen before and no one knows what it is, but it tastes delicious.
But even if people are doing things like nut roasts or Wellingtons, they could even think about adding more proteins, pulses, or choosing a plant-based source of protein, like tempeh is quite a good one. You know, you get more kind of shredded versions now of like tempeh, the mince options. You can add that into the Wellington and the nut roast, so it's not just like vegetables. There's a bit of protein in there, so you can sneak that in.
I think around Christmas, surprisingly, it's the Christmas dinner that probably is the most healthy part of it, and
Yes.
it's everything else going on around it. But just the other thing around Christmas dinner is, I think this is one that people miss out on, is the gravy, and that there is a high chance that you can get the gravy to be healthy or unhealthy depending on how it's created. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know a lot of the shop bought gravies, like the Vista ones, they can be quite high in salt. But you can actually get a lot of low salt stock cubes as well, or, you know, to make the gravy. So there are some good brands where you could just get the low salt ones and mix it with water, add a bit of corn flour to thicken it. And then if you're doing the kind of the roast-based versions, like with chicken and meat, you use the gravy from the actual fats that come off the meat and mix it more with water, add a bit of flour to make it thick. But rather than buying it, you can make it your own using a good vegetable stock.
Because I do worry that pre-made, ready-to-go gravy
Yeah.
is
Higher.
is full of additives, very
Yes.
ultra processed, very likely.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the ingredients list in front of me, but are much more likely to cause glucose spikes for people and actually push blood glucose up over Christmas.
So why not?
Okay, so I've got diabetic clients. They're on insulin, or they're on sort of a couple of medicines, and they're doing really, really well so far. And I think some of them are worrying about Christmas. What would be the best way to tackle the day? Because like we just alluded to, there's things around the Christmas dinner that tends to be less healthy. So if you were to give advice to someone about the start of their day and they're listening right now, what would you suggest to them for breakfast, perhaps?
Yeah.
I don't know, everyone's different because we've got lots of people listening from all over different cultures, but what would you recommend?
Definitely start the day with a good breakfast. Like, they don't have to fear that they shouldn't have breakfast just because they know they're actually going to go and have a massive meal later on. But have a good breakfast that's going to help their blood sugars and keep it stable. So it might be something like a mixed vegetable omelette with some avocado and, you know, or,
That's a really great shout. How could we make that more festive? I reckon we could stick a bit of rosemary on it. I don't know how that would go.
you know, they could grate some vegetables into it. So even like things like leeks, you know, pan fry some leeks, tomatoes, and then they can, even if they want to, put a bit of grated cheese on top, avocado.
I feel like there's a real festive spirit on Christmas Day and perhaps even Christmas Eve as well. And I feel like, as rather being just an omelette, it's going to be the festive omelette. It's going to be a festive omelette, and it's as if red is a really strong color with that.
Red, green.
So it's just like, like red and green. It's just like peppers, tomatoes. Those are the kind of things that I reckon could make it quite festive.
Yeah. Top it with some, if you really want, top it with some mint sauce, a bit of, why not, even a little drizzle of pesto.
Yeah.
Some maybe.
I'm not sure how the gravy would go with the omelette, but maybe that'd be a push too far. I don't know. It'll be you're testing your gravy with your omelette in the morning.
You could add like a bit of mint sauce to go with, like a dash of mint sauce just for that flavour. Or if you've got any chutneys you want to use, just a little bit of it just to give that bit of pesto. You can flavour.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously there's that gap between the breakfast and Christmas dinner. If people are preparing their turkey, things start very early in the kitchen. So I know that things are already happening and there's food flying around. My feeling is that perhaps that's the time where we can try and avoid the treats and the snacks, and that can happen after the lunch, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it can be a bit of it's a challenging time for everyone because people always feel that afternoon slump after they've had that meal, but actually could they do something that's not so much food focused, like go for a walk.
Hey, it's a lovely time to go for a walk.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best days to go for a walk. It's nice and quiet on the streets as well.
Yeah, or do some games with family, keep your body a bit moving, and just tune in to see, hydration. It's a big thing we sometimes forget.
Absolutely. I think Christmas Day is a full 24 hours and people are expecting to have continuous fun and enjoyment and family time all the way through. But actually, that can be exhausting. So I think pacing yourself with the day makes sense. Having a breakfast, starting to get things ready for Christmas lunch. And then after the lunch, if you are doing things with other people, you can actually schedule in that family time with going for the walk at that time. And it helps to break up the day a little bit. And it's probably going to be getting dark by that point, depending on what time people are having their lunch. But if it's not dark, fantastic. You get to get that through dusk and into sunset.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's in the UK, so it's probably going to be cloudy, and it's probably not going to snow, and it's probably got a high chance it's going to rain. So make sure you've got the right clothing for it too. But that's often a nice time to go and say hello to someone else.
Yeah.
And there's this thing around alcohol as well. I think often there's a bit too much pressure around alcohol from everyone and no one's talking about it. You don't have to start drinking in the morning just because it's Christmas Day. And again, it can be blocked out at different times. What would you say around alcohol in diabetes? Would you have any specific opinions on that?
Yeah, I would say, we know the limits, that we should be not going above the limits and being mindful of our alcohol, but that doesn't mean to say you can't have it. It's okay to have a little bit of it for those who do drink. But there's also kind of non-alcoholic options as well for people. And make sure you're kind of staying hydrated if you are having alcohol.
Absolutely. I think having a glass of water
on an empty stomach,
absolutely.
drinking loads.
Yes. And it is a festive season, so red wine's probably one of the better options that you've got. All alcohol is potentially a bit difficult, but red wine is probably going to be better off.
Yeah, or just go for things like, if you are having any spritzers, add some sparkling water to it, or
that's a good one. Or even adding a bit of lemon and lime, fresh lemon, squeezing that in. I think that really adds a nice taste to it, and then you don't have to add in the sugary cordial or other sugary parts to your drink, whether that's a mixer, for example, something else.
And especially like the juices and a lot of the fizzy drinks, they can contain a lot of added sugar. So if you're constantly sipping that throughout the day, then
I think the other key thing is you don't have to eat all of your meal in that sitting. This is the benefit of cooking too much. This. You've got Boxing Day, and you've probably got even the day after Boxing Day. You don't have to cook for like 2 days because you've done it all in one day.
Yeah,
in a big batch cook.
Exactly. I think there's that pressure that you have to finish everything on your plate, but actually you don't need to. And leftovers always taste great the next day. Like the roast always tastes better, I find anyway. It tastes,
totally
so much nicer.
And I think there's this Christmas feast kind of feeling, and it means that often, and I think people have probably experienced in the past, that the evening doesn't have to be filled with another big dinner. Yes. And I think a lot of people don't go for the really big dinner anyway. So then the whole day isn't so daunting after all, I hope, for
Yeah.
people.
And I think people should just kind of tune in and just just ask yourself, how are you feeling after that meal? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to have another meal because you usually would have another meal, like really listen and tune into your hunger cues.
Totally. I don't think all diabetics are worried about Christmas. And I think the difference is often those who have a really deep understanding as to what foods are doing for their body and where their blood glucose levels are, then they're less worried, even if the blood glucose is going to go a bit higher because they've got the bigger picture at play. It's when people really don't know where their blood glucose is, what's
Yeah.
happening with their foods. There's this lack of control, and then it makes people feel really nervous and a bit jittery sometimes about how's this going to impact my diabetes.
Yeah.
It's a constant thinking process
Yeah.
that people get.
Yeah. And it can put a lot of pressure, I guess, on that person as to what food choices they can make, especially if they're surrounded with other people who may not have diabetes, and then
Totally.
they feel like they may feel a bit left out as well.
Yeah, totally. I agree. It is stressful for some people. So I think we got to recognize that. So let's just think about who Gopi is. Who is Gopi behind the nutritionist? So if I was to remove nutrition from your identity, who is Gopi?
Well, Gopi is the founder of Gopi's Nourishing Recipes. I
Yes.
actually love cooking. I'm very much into my health and wellness. So exercise for me, I do it more for my mind than anything. I recently did like a 30-day yoga challenge for charity. Because
You did a what, sorry?
I recently did a 30-day yoga challenge
Okay, wow.
for charity for mind, because my mental health hasn't been great this year. Just because
Yeah.
I'm a nutritionist doesn't mean I have this perfect lifestyle. And I think that's what people assume. Oh, they look at you and they think, oh, you're a nutritionist. You must eat really healthy. And, social media only shows like it doesn't depict someone's whole life.
Totally.
Tend to show like the positive aspects.
I think that's a really common theme that when I ask people that, they say that they are human. There's lots of other things going on around them. And then when I catch someone, not catch them, when I see someone, a colleague, and he's eating a pizza and he goes, we're allowed to eat pizza too. I'm like, yeah, I know, chill. I'm just joking.
Yeah, I think there's that assumption, and for me, like exercise has been such a great savior. Like I absolutely love it. And yeah, so I took part in this 30-day yoga challenge for mind. It was doing yoga every day for 30 days. And the beauty behind it was the movement didn't need to be like 1 hour, like just 5-10 minutes, any amount you can do. If you have the time, great. But just 5 minutes of movement. And I did that for 30 days. I did like different durations, but actually it's very easy to fit 5 minutes of exercise in your whole day. And it's those small habits that can improve your lifestyle long term. It's those small changes. So for me,
Totally.
exercise is part of my daily kind of routine. Things like meditation, that silence, for me, I crave it a lot. And
Yeah.
morning routine.
Well, you live in London, don't you?
Yeah.
I think I've heard a few sirens go past already. So I think I can understand why you.
And that space to think, that awareness, that space has given me time to kind of pursue my passion in what I love to do. Like I never thought I'd be sitting here doing a podcast today, put it that way.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's being present, isn't it? In those moments, the presentism now happens because of the time that you're able to give back to yourself and look after yourself.
Absolutely.
I think there's a couple really some really interesting things you picked up on there. There's the exercise kind of snacking in a way. I don't like the term, but it's exercise snacking, doing small amounts of it, but keeping it consistent. But also around this resting side of it, not just resting, but actually mindfulness and meditation and yoga, the things that aren't just good for exercise, but also good for the mind. And it was a discussion that I was having in the last couple of days around the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, which is parasympathetic, and the fight or flight, which is sympathetic, and where we tend to sit in the spectrum. And really, we need to get a balance between the two, but we're often, so much so in the modern world, put into overdrive in our sympathetic fight or flight mode. And we're not getting enough of that. And that's essentially what you're doing, isn't it? With the mindfulness and the meditation, you're moving into that bracket.
Absolutely. And it gives you that awareness to think more. There's that clarity you get. And I've been like, that this year's been a total change. Like I've gotten self-employed now. Never thought I'd be doing that. Been
Right.
in full-time employment for so long, and now I've decided to
Yeah,
really pursue my passion, which is to empower and educate people to lead a healthy lifestyle through a non-diet approach to a holistic way with evidence-based
absolutely.
nutrition.
Yeah. And the you mentioned the other thing, which is around this doing small amounts, frequent amounts of exercise. This is so important. I feel that people look at the numbers that they're meant to do each week, and it's just sort of like, well, it's just, even to me, it's like 150 minutes. I never measure like my week's exercise. Yeah, I might measure how long I was in the gym,
Yeah,
but only because I looked at my watch before and after, or I knew that I only had 20 minutes. But I'm never like, have I hit my 150 minutes? Never has that ever go through my mind. So I think it's totally unacceptable and not possible to expect us to think that patients should be, or clients should be even thinking, should be even thinking in the same way.
absolutely.
I think there's a really strong message there that you can get gains and you can improve your fitness. And it's all about the consistency rather than doing a lot in one day. It makes such a big difference. And 5 minutes, how do you make it happen in 5 minutes?
I'll follow maybe a YouTube workout or do my own, like when it comes to yoga, I might just do like a morning stretch. Doesn't have to be anything major, but just like a small stretch to just get me going, to get me moving. And now a lot of us are working from home, so we're sitting down a lot. So it is short bouts of movement, it's not, we don't always have the time to, sometimes we may not have the time to go for a walk. So you may want to do that in the morning or after work, but it's just that getting up,
I think so. I think it's recognizing that even that is a success
Yeah,
when it comes to movement. And just because
absolutely.
you've done a small amount, that's much more than doing nothing. And the
Yeah,
biggest impacts that anyone can have, including people who have been previously much more active in the past, is actually from 0 to 1 rather
yeah,
than 1 to 2 or even 9 to 10.
yeah,
It's that first bit that has the biggest impact. And we see that in actual health data.
exactly. And even when it comes to nutrition, it's the small changes. We've seen it with some of the MAHEL patients, the small
Mm,
lifestyle changes that they make, the small
mm.
swaps. But for them, it's a big win, right?
Yeah. Well, small swaps that happen every day consistently become big things.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, yeah, one day not eating one thing for one day will not do anything really to your health. But if you're doing that every day or you're choosing a better
Mm.
option, then actually that's going to start to have impacts. But it may not necessarily happen in a day or a week. It may take a little bit longer, but people have to be, I think, patient with that
Yeah.
as well.
And I think that's the issue because everyone wants a magic pill when it comes to curing the health or, especially weight loss. But
Mm.
sadly, there is no magic pill. And it is,
Yeah.
like you said, consistency, time, and eventually, you know, it will come together and things will fall into place.
Yeah, totally. I think people got to realize that there's a number of different things together, and it's this thing around habit stacking, isn't it? You've got to keep doing lots and lots of different things,
Mm.
and that's where the variety comes in, because then it becomes easy. Because if you don't feel like something or you don't have something, you always have something else that you can do. And then the other reason that things become easy is because of enjoyment. People enjoy doing certain things. Going back to this Christmas dinner,
Yeah,
Christmas lunch, people are going to enjoy it, hopefully, what they're eating, and they're going to enjoy the day. They've planned it all out, and it's still not going to be massively negative on their health either.
I think if you can find joy in what you do, things become easier. Like even whether it's cooking or cooking a new recipe or adding more vegetables or whatever the change that you're implementing, and with that right support and that coaching, positive results, you will definitely see it.
Absolutely. So look, with the World Cancer Research Fund, you've got quite a few recipes on there, and we've been sharing some of these with my clients as well recently. What is your favorite recipe that you've got on the World Cancer Research Fund website? You might get confused because I know you're on other websites
Yeah.
too. So
Well, I had
what is your
to create,
favorite website and favorite recipe out there?
well, I had to create, I think it was about 12 recipes for this Cook Through Cancer project. So there was a brief and the recipes had to be, there was a certain criteria of the recipe. So high in fiber, they had to have a certain amount of protein. They were nutritionally analysed by a nutritionist at World Cancer Research Fund. So they had to be in line with certain guidelines. So I had to like literally test the recipe a few times and then come up with ideas and the recipes. But I think a couple of my favourites would be, there's a salmon and kale curry,
Mm.
a
I
really
don't
good
think I've had
one.
that combination before.
Yeah, so
I
that was
haven't
like,
seen that one. I'll have to look that one up.
And my other one was, maybe I'm going to go for the sweet option. It was actually a mango and chia pudding, so it wasn't.
Yeah.
We didn't have any.
Well, I think one of your
Yeah.
specialties is puddings.
Yeah.
Seeing your recipes, you do like a good pudding.
Yeah, I like to try and put a twist in a lot of the recipes, so it is a little bit healthy as well. And the chia pudding didn't have any kind of added sugar. It's just the fruit, and we used a bit of low-fat coconut milk, I think, from what I can remember.
Yeah. So we're still getting something that's really tasty and tastes like
And
dessert, but it
nutritious.
isn't like the ultra processed things that
Yeah,
we're finding, and it's got better ingredients and it's going to
there
be
you
a
go.
little bit more nutritious for you as well. Okay, great. Tell me a little bit more about the communities that you used to run and how did they look and where were they delivered?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my time as a nutritionist. That's where I really grew and developed as a nutritionist in Hounslow. Very diverse, population. I had to target different ethnic community groups, about 360 participants. It was called the Cook and Eat program back then. Kitchens were basic. I had to go to estates, council estates. I was in youth clubs, but the ethnic groups that I had to target were the South Asians, the BAME community. We had the Polish, we had an Afghan community. I did those with learning disabilities. So I remember going around with my shopping bags, going to all these different community groups and educating these people on how to cook healthy 4-week course. I'd be moving
What
around.
was there anything consistent that they were doing that was unhealthy throughout all these groups?
I think a lot of it is the lack of knowledge and awareness. They didn't know some of the basic principles around, like eating 5 a day,
Yeah,
the different types of fruit and vegetables. Sugar was another one.
yeah.
And cooking methods,
So it might seem really simple, but
yeah.
in a way, what you're doing is like sort of the best way to get to a community is to meet them where they're at, isn't it?
And they're all in the same boat. So, they all didn't have that knowledge around what is a healthy, balanced diet. So we talked about the Eat Well Guide, which is the government recommendations around some of the principles of healthy eating. And I got them involved in actually teaching them how to cook basic, simple food. Like a lot of them didn't know much about porridge oats for breakfast, but you can actually have that as a breakfast.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of lack of knowledge, I would say. And English was a language.
That really is interesting, isn't it? And you must have gained a really wide variety of knowledge of foods as well that people are eating.
Absolutely.
That perhaps you hadn't been exposed to as well.
Yeah. And I was learning about different cultural foods from different food groups, what their main staples are. We would say, okay, how can we turn this around and make it more nutritious? You don't need to cut it out, but, like with the Polish population, it's more meat-based and carb-heavy. So it's looking at the different types of carbs, the complex more versions, and the way they cook the meat as well, and the type of meat they're using. With the South Asian cooking, it's more everything's kind of fried and the amount of oil they're using in their cooking and less vegetables. So it was how can we get them to make that change?
Okay, so there's a big amount of variety there. I think that there's still a major issue with South Asian diets around oil and sugar. Don't know what it is, but it is really shocking to me. I can't unsee what I'm currently seeing in places in the UK where there is a higher proportion of Indian restaurants and Indians living. I'm just seeing in my view, a real lack of care, a lack of responsibility of the things that we're putting in food that we're feeding our friends and our families.
And the funny thing is that when it comes to sugar, they think, coconut sugar or palm sugar, also known as jaggery, is a natural sweetener. It's an alternative, or like honey. And it's like, no, it is, try to explain it to them. But again, it comes down to the knowledge and the awareness and getting them just to be mindful about, anything in excess, is going to have an impact on.
I think so. I think there's an overt normalization of diabetes as well. It's sort of like, yes, I've got it, and what can I do about it? Oh, this is just a bad day. Maybe tomorrow I'll be okay. But it continues, and then people are then getting the complications, and it's kind of like this resignation that this is our destiny, but it isn't your destiny. You do have choice. You can actually start to make changes. it's just not easy to see the changes to begin with. So it can feel a bit fruitless to begin with, but then that then starts to improve.
And we
Just to
know
type,
with life, with type 2 diabetes, a lot of the prevention is around lifestyle, and food
yeah,
plays a big role.
yeah, totally. There is that, of course, and then there's the environment that
Yeah.
people are in. Of course, if that's the only place that you're going to be able to eat out, and those are the variety of dishes that you're being presented to you, it's very difficult to eat healthy in that environment too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think nowadays, when it comes to going to restaurants, we have more choice. The choice is vast. So there are
Tell me a little
options.
bit. I really want to know. Sorry, because we've only got 10 minutes,
Yeah,
so I want to make sure I cover a few things.
yeah.
I really want to know a bit more about your hospital work and what you did in hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job, I started off as a dietetic assistant. Back in the days when I did my degree, it was a very long time ago. We're talking about 2007. So we're going a long time back. And at that time, I didn't know.
Well, some people will say you're still very young compared to some people that are watching, so can't be too far back.
So at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do in terms of nutrition. I wasn't guided as to where I can go in my nutrition field, like what are the careers in nutrition. We weren't taught about that. So I worked with a team of dietitians, and it really opened my eyes. So I worked in like the oncology wards, elderly care, and it was doing the food audits, like the protected meal times audits, malnutrition screening, and the hospital food we know it's not great. Whether or
It's
not,
still not.
yeah, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I lost you there.
The other one died. I've got
Okay,
a
no
new one.
worries.
The battery's just died. I think that's why I was flashing the entire
Okay,
time
no
that we
worries.
were on. I'll have to put that one on charge later. Yeah, I was going to say, it's as if you've got your foundational aspects with your nutrition from the hospital. It's given you like your entrance into nutrition. It's a
Absolutely.
really varied career that you've had, actually.
Yeah.
So the last things I really want to just pick up on are your Instagram and what you love most about doing the Instagram, because I really love your Instagram. It's one of those
Thank
pages that
you.
gives a little smile, gives a bit of joy internally when you go on it. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about the Instagram and why you're doing some of the things that you do on there.
Yeah. I mean, I just started my Instagram page. Can't remember now. It's a while back. I think it was during kind of COVID time. I designed a website. I think I was just so passionate about. I've always been from a young age. I've always enjoyed cooking. I've always loved it, and I did the home economics for A levels and food technology and GCSEs. So, and then I just did. I mean, I didn't expect anything from it. I just did these recipes and I just started posting it and some nutritional content. And I'm so grateful for where I am today because it's led to so many opportunities. I never in a million years didn't expect to be working with food brands.
Yeah, it's
My life has changed slightly. And I know social media is not everything, but for me, I just post. Some people are going to like it, some people are not. And we know that is with social media, but I just get a great buzz out of posting recipes, my nutritional content, or, whatever it is, it's there for people. My saying is I like to be inspired, but also like to be inspired by others.
I love that.
I
I love that.
like to get inspiration.
And you've got more information on those pictures, haven't you, on your website, Gopi's Nourishing
Yes.
Recipes.
Yeah.
And it's easy to find on Google. You just search Gopi's recipes and you're straight up there. So that's great. But you've got lots and lots of information on recipes out there, and I think they've been really helpful for the clients at Mahi as well. Any specific ones that you would say in diabetes that might be worth people looking at on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of kind of lunch, dinner recipes that are quite nutritionally balanced, and they're quite simple. So again, it's going back to like bowl type recipes, quick cook recipes, but incorporating more kind of the fiber, the plant-based options. So my recipes are quite easy to follow. They're simple. They're not, nothing extravagant. They're just basic, simple, colourful, nourishing recipes that, you can make and you can adapt it to make it your own. So you don't need to follow it, precisely. You can always add in other ingredients.
Well, you do make them look stunning. Am I still on? Yeah.
Yes.
You do make them look stunning.
Thank you. Well, I like to make it colourful. I'm just looking at them. Appealing. So
yeah, there are so many good things here for diabetics. I think it's just worth people knowing. Like I'm just seeing here, there's the jackfruit curry. Yeah. I've never really used jackfruit in cooking, but it's a really nice texture, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's good in like wraps or with something.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And then you got the plant-based stir-fried rice. That looks so good. The courgette and pea soup and the lentil soup. They look
Yes, did
amazing.
that recently with
Is
the
that a new one?
I did that recently with cancer patients. We did a cook along and it was soups because it's the winter season. So
Yeah.
had to get more kind of nutrition during this cold weather.
I think there's a really nice, I love this one for the festive season, the harissa fish roast.
Yes,
So in our family, the Christmas fish is the famous thing that we have instead of the
try
Christmas
that.
turkey. So that harissa fish roast looks really, really
Nice.
good. And the winter warming vegan casserole, there's loads of stuff here for this season, isn't it? Yeah. So thank you for sharing all those recipes. I think if people are listening, go have a look because I think they're going to be quite helpful for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're wrapping up. I would love to know, Gopi, what's the future for you? What's your perspective on the future of nutrition and where the industry is going and what people can gain from people like you working with you?
It's definitely evolving. There's always new research. So as registered health professionals, we need to keep up to date of emerging research. But we're trying to make, obviously, nutritionist is not a protected title. It's not regulated. And that's something we all want to see more registered nutritionists out there, more associate nutritionists. They are registered with a professional body and making sure the
Totally.
advice we give is evidence-based. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
There is.
A
And it
lot
was
of,
a big topic that we were going to try and cover today, but we
yeah,
totally
I
haven't even
know.
got there.
There's so
But I think
much.
we've covered more on the festive
Yeah.
diets rather than the
So it is
misinformation.
about educating people around evidence-based with evidence-based information. I think it's so important.
It's really confusing, isn't it, out
So
there? I
confusing.
think even I'm confused, and I think a lot of other people are confused or confused silently because we're getting information that lots of people are listening to, and now we can't ignore it because whatever
Yes.
the information, whether it's right or wrong, give it to us enough, we'll start to believe it. That's the evidence. So then we have to then go and start to refute what we're seeing and become even more confident. But only certain people are doing that, and other people continue to say whatever they like
And
online.
it's the people
And it
with
is a very difficult.
the big following that, if there's a big kind of broadcast message, everyone gets sucked in.
Yeah,
And then there's people
it
like
is.
us trying to, help people in an
Yeah.
ethical, mindful way. And it's a bit frustrating.
It's the power of marketing, and it's about
Yes,
working with
exactly.
marketing
Exactly.
ethically. And it is a bit difficult at the moment because before there's a lot of regulation, the way that people could advertise is very different. But now there's this whole online arena,
Yes.
and the amount of information being pumped out is so quick, so fast, and so vast.
Yeah.
It's virtually impossible even for regulators to be able to
Yeah,
understand how to deal with
absolutely.
this. Yeah. Okay, great. So I think we'll definitely have to have you on again because there's so much more to talk
No, there's
about.
so much more to talk about.
And I
Thanks
love
so much.
talking about the festive foods. It's something that we might have to do again in spring
Yeah,
again and talk about
absolutely.
spring foods. Okay. So look, great to have you on,
Thank
and
you
we'll
so
see
much.
you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.